Now I'm sure everyone knows that Damage Control is arguably one of the greatest and one of the most destructive, if you will, female factions in all of WWE. From winning tag team gold multiple times over, to headlining WrestleMania, to competing inside War Games. Those five women, Bayley, Asuka, Kairi Sane, Io Sky, and Dakota Kai, dominated WWE's women's division across all three brands with an iron fist. But the question is, how did Damage Control start? Well, we actually have to go back a ways to when Bayley first started in NXT. Bayley started her career, her WWE career in NXT right around 2013, 2014-ish, somewhere around there, and she became a household name. She became such a fan favorite to the point where she was finally able to become NXT Women's Champion. She had been in the ring with some of the absolute best that NXT had to offer at that time. Women such as Carmella, Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, and so many others later on. One of her last matches in NXT was against Asuka for the NXT Women's title. That match took place at NXT TakeOver Dallas in 2016. The next NXT TakeOver that they did, Asuka defeated Bayley once again, making that match Bayley's last match ever in NXT, and the respect that Bayley had for Asuka was obviously there. She got called up to the main roster at WWE Battleground in 2016. in 2016 in the summer, for one night only, joining forces with Sasha Banks against Charlotte Flair and Dana Brooke, now known as Ash by Elegance. Excuse me. She made her Raw debut right after SummerSlam that year in 2016 and became Raw Women's Champion many months later. Over time, NXT became so popular for the women's division that they decided to hold the Mae Young Classic. The first Mae Young Classic featured none other than Kairi Sane and Dakota Kai, to which Dakota Kai lost in the second round, if my memory serves correct, and Kairi Sane made it all the way to the finals and won the whole thing by defeating Shayna Baszler. With that being said, this obviously led to, if I can figure this out here. There we go. This obviously led to Kairi Sane becoming NXT Women's Champion in her own right, only for her to lose it at the first ever all women's PLE known as Evolution. Then came the second ever Mae Young Classic, and enter Io Shirai, aka now known as Io Sky. She made it all the way to the finals before losing to Toni Storm at said PLE known as Evolution. Over time, these five women had all went their separate ways and made it big, not only in NXT, but also on the main roster. Obviously, with Io Sky, she changed her look and her demeanor in order to become NXT Women's Champion and held on to the title until NXT TakeOver Stand and Deliver, the first ever Stand and Deliver premium live event. That took place actually losing we gotta backtrack that a little bit. She won the title at NXT Takeover in Your House in a triple threat, but lost it at Stand and Deliver to none other than Raquel Rodriguez. Obviously, in 2019, Kairi Sane got called up to the main roster and aligned herself with Asuka to form the Kabuki Warriors and became multi-time tag team champions over the next several years. Obviously, there was a lot going on with these five women, but it all led to obviously Dakota Kai, her becoming one half of the first ever NXT Women's Tag Team Champions, and also becoming two-time champions actually alongside Raquel Rodriguez. The first time it did not last. Actually, both times it didn't last very long. The first run only lasted a few minutes, but their second run only lasted a few days. This led to obviously in that timeline from Asuka's reign as NXT Women's Champion up until SummerSlam in 2022, when Damage Control was first formed. Bayley had become Raw Women's Champion, Miss Money in the Bank, Women's Tag Team Champion, and SmackDown Women's Champion as well. In fact, her second run as SmackDown Women's Champion, she held on to the title for 480 days, which is the longest reign of that championship in its history, which is just incredible on its own. Not only that, but Bayley went on to become Bayley Dose Straps, becoming SmackDown Women's Champion and Women's Tag Team Champion alongside Sasha Banks. Obviously in that timeline, Bayley lost the tag titles to Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax, and also lost the SmackDown Women's Championship to Sasha Banks, which led to Bayley just getting lost in the shuffle, and she ended up getting hurt. At Stand and Deliver in 2022, Io Sky in a fatal 4-way match for the NXT Women's title got injured, and she was said to be out of action for about a year. Dakota Kai on the other hand, after her NXT tag title loss to none other than Toxic Attraction, Dakota Kai ended up getting released from WWE. This led to obviously Bayley, kindling a friendship, and a sisterhood, if you will, to with Dakota Kai and Io Sky, and that is how Damage Control was first formed. Bayley returned to WWE in August of 2022 at SummerSlam after Bianca Belair defeated Becky Lynch to retain the Raw Women's title. In fact, we all expected Bianca Belair to be the last ever Raw Women's Champion before becoming the first ever WWE Women's Champion, which did not come to pass, but we will get to that later on in this video. After Bianca's celebration, Bayley's music hits, and she returned with a vengeance, bringing in not only Dakota Kai, who at that time was supposed to have been no longer under contract with WWE, but according to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, apparently Dakota Kai signed a new deal with WWE, and it was behind closed doors, and no one knew about it. Not one person within WWE knew about it, and not even the fans. And also brought in the return of Io Sky, who had came back from a serious knee injury, and that was supposed to have taken her out for about a year. This obviously led to all three women taking out Becky Lynch with an injury, and thus Damage Control was formed. Obviously, both Io and Dakota went on to become three-time women's tag team champions, and then we enter Asuka. She comes back after War Games, and after her loss to Rhea Ripley, she returned to WWE in the 2023 Women's Royal Rumble match, losing the match, being eliminated by none other than Rhea Ripley, but winning the Elimination Chamber in Montreal to get a shot at Bianca Belair at WrestleMania. Obviously, Asuka lost that match, but won the title. But won the title at Night of Champions later on that year. This made Asuka the last ever Raw Women's Champion and the first ever WWE Women's Champion. Io Sky went on to win the Women's Money in the Bank ladder match and cashed in less than a month later at SummerSlam on Bianca Belair. This obviously led to none other than a match at Crown Jewel featuring the return of Kairi Sane, and we did not expect her to return whatsoever, considering the fact that it was Bayley that threw Kairi out of WWE during the pandemic. Kairi accepted Bayley's apology, so to speak, and ended up joining Damage Control. This led to a massive 6-woman tag, which, well, Asuka turned her back on her team to join with Damage Control. This basically allowed Bayley to help make Damage Control stronger than ever before, but the rest of Damage Control was pretty much distant from her, and even inside of War Games, it was pretty crazy to say the very least. At that time, Dakota Kai was injured. She had suffered a very devastating knee injury that put her out of action for several months. Obviously, yes, she was able to show up on TV full time, but she wasn't allowed to wrestle, which she was cleared several months later after War Games. This led to Bayley winning the Women's Royal Rumble match last year in 2024, and she couldn't decide which champion she wanted. It was either she would go after her own Damage Control cohort Io Sky, or go after Rhea Ripley and complete the prophecy of Damage Control holding both world titles in the women's division in WWE. But obviously Bayley knew Japanese quite well and fully understood what the rest of Damage Control was saying, and this led to the split up and the backstab, if you will, of Damage Control to Bayley. This forced Bayley to turn babyface and went on to WrestleMania to win the WWE Women's title. After a while, Damage Control seemed to be a bit distant, if you will, because of the fact that we move into Backlash in Lyon, France. Asuka gets hurt, so she's completely out of the question. She's out for a whole year. This basically meant that Dakota Kai, Io Sky, and Kairi Sane had to hold down the fort for Damage Control. So with that being said, pretty much everybody had kind of went their separate ways a little bit. Obviously obviously Kairi Sane had went on to go out, had went on to have her own singles glory. Io Sky went on to become women's world champion. Dakota Kai obviously wanted to go after the WWE Women's Intercontinental title, only to end up losing twice to Lyra Valkyria. First time was in the finals of the tournament, and the second matchup was the rematch for said title. However, it wasn't long after that we moved into this past year's WrestleMania, and pretty much everybody had went their separate ways. Io Sky became the only member of Damage Control that competed at WrestleMania, and everyone else did not. In fact, right after WrestleMania, just mere weeks later, we found out that Dakota Kai got released of her contract with WWE, the same as did R-Truth, Braun Strowman, and even Dakota Kai's own boyfriend, none other than Eddie Thorpe. However, with R-Truth, he ended up signing a brand new deal with WWE, but that was behind closed doors, under the table, so to speak. So this obviously led to Kairi Sane and Asuka pretty much competing in the Queen of the Ring tournament. Kairi Sane got eliminated in the first round. Asuka went all the way to the finals before losing to Jade Cargill this past Saturday at Night of Champions. This basically signified the end of Damage Control as we know it. It is a bit unfortunate because Damage Control was truly a great faction. It was by far one of the greatest factions I had ever seen. I would probably say since the Undisputed Era, but in my opinion, I feel like Damage Control, in a way, it makes sense. I think because that everybody had went their separate ways. Bayley wanting to become women's tag team champion with Lyra Valkyria, also wanting to go after the women's Intercontinental title, now being held by Becky Lynch. And Io Sky obviously having her, having a match with Rhea Ripley at Evolution. Kairi Sane, just doing her own thing. Asuka doing her own thing. Dakota Kai, doing things outside of WWE. It's safe to say that the end of Damage Control, kind of slowly took shape after WrestleMania last year in Philadelphia, which it makes sense. I think all of them going their separate ways. I think it's perfectly fine. I think at this point, Asuka has already has had such an incredible Hall of Fame career. It's only a matter of time before she gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, and it's only a matter of time before Bayley herself gets inducted as well. However, this ties into the big question of whether or not we could see Damage Control get inducted into the Hall of Fame as a complete group, and the answer is yes. 100% we can totally see it, but I think as far as like what the future holds for Damage Control, with Io, obviously she's had such an incredible reign as women's world champion. She had her massive WrestleMania moment, pinning Bianca Belair, ending her streak, ending her own WrestleMania undefeated streak. That right there alone was just crazy. An incredible moment. Asuka, having her moment, competing in the finals of the Queen of the Ring tournament. Kairi Sane wanting to go after the women's IC title, as does Bayley. I mean, is it possible that Damage Control could reunite at some point? 100%, absolutely 100%. We could totally see it, but it just depends on the scenario and whether or not we would see Dakota Kai back in WWE, which can happen It's happened before. I'm pretty sure it could happen again at some point. But Damage Control, man, hell of a group. Completely decimated the entire women's division with an iron fist, ruled it with an iron fist, and they basically became the measuring sticks of the entire women's division in WWE on Raw, SmackDown, and even also NXT, because there were several times where tag teams from NXT would go after Damage Control and the women's tag team titles. I will say, I think all of that, again, as I stated, them going their separate ways, it's perfectly fine. I think it kind of ran. I think Damage Control as a group kind of ran its course right after War Games last year, but it slowly started to take shape of them going their separate ways at last year's WrestleMania in Philly. But once War Games came up, it just slowly started to realize this is the end. We are reaching the end of Damage Control as we know it, just like we saw the end of the Bloodline story as we knew it, or so we thought. In as far as Solo Sikoa is concerned, he's trying to start up a new Bloodline once again, which is just dumb in my opinion. But on that note, let me know down in the comments below your favorite Damage Control moment, and whether or not and do you want to see Damage Control reunite at some point down the road. Let me know down in the comments below. Excuse me, and that'll do it for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button. If you guys are new to the channel and you guys want more WWE topic videos in the future, then be sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and as always, make sure you guys are following me on all of my social media. All of my ads will be in the description below, as will the info to my fan mail. It will also be down in the description as well. And on that, this is your boy Nash, signing out.